Hello, I'm Professor Benavides, and I want to go ahead and show you how to do a console app in Java. Now we're going to use NetBeans as our IDE, and when I say console app, I'm talking about using the scanner class to go ahead and receive and show output. So let's go ahead and start by starting NetBeans. And this little application, very simple. We're just going to go ahead and ask for ounces to convert. We'll go ahead and perform some conversions, and then we'll show the output. Now we'll show the output formatted, and let's go ahead and dive right into this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File, New Project, and I'm going to select Java Application next. I'm going to go ahead and call this, I'm going to go ahead and just call this ounces. Now you could call it ounces conversion scanner, or whatever you'd like, but I'm just going to call it ounces. Notice how I start with the capital O. That's because the name of the project will become the name of the class. It's really important that you understand that in Java. Now I'm going to click on the Browse button and choose the desktop to put my project folder there. Then I'm going to come down over here and I'm going to get rid of the package statement, because we're not going to use package statements in this application. Looking at it again, I'm creating a project called ounces with a capital O. And you always want to go ahead and give your application a name that is related to what you're doing. So this creates the package for us. Notice the structure that I have on the left-hand side here. If I collapse it, expand it, a lot of times students have difficulty finding the Java file. Let me go ahead and close that here, close the start page. Sometimes it'll open up like this. You have to navigate to the source packages and make sure that you open up the default package to find ounces, okay? So for right here, I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of all of the unessential comments, and I'm gonna align the curly brackets. Now this is not typically something that's done in production level code, but it's something that is a good practice for beginners. Now, why is it a good practice for beginners? It's a good practice for beginners because it allows you to structurally see the important parts of your program. If you'll notice here, okay, notice here that I have a class definition, and in that class definition, I've got my main method, okay? Continue to clean this out. I've aligned my curly brackets and got rid of all of the unessential comments. I'm going to go ahead and comment the main method. That is so that it can help me to understand I'm not supposed to delete that curly bracket. And also later on, we're going to need to know where to put our code. Sometimes we put our code outside of main, okay? And we want to go ahead and designate the ending curly bracket for the class. Right? And of course, before we do any kind of application in Java, it's always a good idea to do some kind of documentation. Okay? So, different ways to do documentation. If you put a slash and then an asterisk, notice how everything is a comment. But if I press enter right now, it puts the closing. It's really important that if you're going to let the editor help you write the code, that you don't end up doing something that's going to hurt you later on, like making everything a comment. If you make everything a comment, then when you run your code, nothing's going to happen. Of course, what should be a slapping you in the face that everything is a comment is that everything is light gray. So in this case, I can see that my colors are good. And I'm just going to go ahead and designate the name of the program, the name of the programmer, the date, and a little description. Okay. And a lot of times, this is referred to as general comments, comments that we use inside of main and refer to as specific comments. So I'm just going to call this ounces. We'll go ahead and put my name. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in the date. I'll just use a general. Okay, I'll put the exact date. And description, I'll just say, okay. So let's go ahead and get right into this. Now, a lot of students, many times, they spend a lot of time pressing the space bar and tab keys. And I like to promote the idea that you want to let the editor help you write your code. So I go right in there at the end of the the opening curly bracket, and when I press enter, that's where my code needs to be. It's kind of distressing to receive a program from someone, and I don't know why. Some people like to just left justify everything. So you can imagine there, every line of code, every curly bracket, everything left justified. Indentation is really important in helping you understand the structure of the program. And you want to use the indentation that the editor will help you with. Now, some basic comments are important. We call them specific comments, just to give us an idea of where we're going. We're going to have to create a scanner object. We're also going to have to go ahead and receive input from the console and convert it to numeric. And then I'm going to have to perform conversions. So basically, I'm going to say, how many ounces do you want to convert? And I'm going to convert it to cup, pint, quart, gallon. Okay, so we'll just say perform conversions. There is such a thing as commenting too much. Sometimes I comment a lot, but it's only for instructional purposes. You probably don't have that level of commenting on simple concepts like I'm doing now. We're also going to have to create the decimal formatter object. And we do this so that we can format the numbers. And we'll do it once without formatting, and then once with. I think it's important to see it. You don't want to you want to see what your code looks like or what the output looks like without the formatting, and then format it. That way you get an appreciation for what you're doing. And then lastly, we'll build the output, and then we'll show the output. We're going to build an output string, and then we're going to go ahead and show output string. Okay. That's pretty much my program. I know what I'm going to do now. Now I know that if I want to use a scanner object, I've got to import the scanner class, and if I want to format the numbers, I've got to bring in a formatter or formatter class. In this case, let's use the decimal format. So I might as well just get it out of the way now. I could do it as I need it, but for right now, let's just do the import statements ahead of time. It's in the util package, and that's where the scanner class is. See how I just type in SC, and I'm going to press the tab key and then semicolon. You want to let the editor help you write your code. You don't. Otherwise, if you're a human being, chances are you're going to type it in wrong. So import java.text, and in this case, we're going to use decimal format. Semicolon, right? And those little yellow lines are there because we haven't used them yet. We will go, and they will go away when we use them. I think a very good thing to look at when you write your code is to make sure that every variable that you've declared, every import statement is used. Why? Because it's kind of like a sign of someone who doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, if you declare variables and you don't use them, it's because you're really mixed up. So you want to make sure your code is very clean, everything is used, So let's go ahead and create our scanner object. So that would be scanner and the name of the object. We could just call it X, Y, Z, but that's not good style in Java. We typically like to give it a name that represents what it does. The only time like X, Y, Z are maybe acceptable would be like when you're creating an expression or the result of an equation that is generic for exploratory purposes. I'll explain this in just a minute. Okay, so basically, what we got here is the statement that will create your scanner object. And the way that's done is, first of all, I see the word scanner with a capital C. Now, it's got a capital C because scanners is a class. Input is going to be the object. So the syntax here is class object. Just like how remember how we created an integer variable? It was int age, right? Well, very similar. But when we create an object, we need to, many times we use it something called a constructor, or we call the constructor, and that's done when we put in the new keyword. And the new keyword will create the object. Now that will become more meaningful to you later on. But for right now, you have to understand that in order to create the object, you're going to need to use the new keyword, repeat the name of the class, and pass it system.in. Now system.in is what will give you the capability of receiving the text at the command line. Okay, because really what we do here in NetBeans, we see our output down over here below. This is just a protected, sort of like a simplified view of the command line. To get to the command line, you type in CMD, and that's really where you this is really running the program. So I'm creating an object called input. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do, let's go ahead and notice at the top that the yellow line went away on line 7. Okay, very good. So now I'm going to go ahead and receive input, and we'll do this with an S out. And I'm going to go ahead and then say, how many ounces do you wish to convert? Look at this. I'm going to press the space bar right after that. Really important when we're creating an application that's going to run at the console to have a space after the question mark. Pressing enter now, I create a variable. I'm just going to call it OZ. Usually we spell out the whole word unless it's something that's just, really apparent as to what it represents. Now, this line here is going to get whatever you put in, and it's going to convert it to a double and then assign it to the OZ variable. Okay, so going left to right, if we can, I'm saying double OZ. So I'm creating a variable called OZ for ounce that is of the double data type. We know that everything that comes in from a prompt is a string. So what I have to do is convert that string to the proper data type. Now, if I'm asking you just for your name, that's a string. It doesn't matter. I don't need to convert it, right? But if I'm asking you how old you are, I'll use a different method. So instead of next double, I would use next int if I was asking you for your age. In this case, I'm going to be asking you for something that I'm going to go ahead and want to be placed into a variable of double data type. Now I'm going to go ahead and perform my conversions. So we'll say double cup gets, and then we'll just do the conversions. Simple little math stuff. Cup, pint. Quart. I probably should spell it out, but I think QT should do it. Last one would be gallon. If you want to spell these out completely, that's okay with me. Okay, so that's my conversions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create the decimal formatter. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of students create decimal formatters and then they forget to use them. You want to make sure that if you're creating something that you use it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our decimal formatter object. And I'm going to call this pattern formatter. Notice how in Java, if we have two words, the first character of the first word is lowercase, but the first character of the second word is always capitalized. That's our style. We don't use underscore like in Python, right? We don't, you know, so we certainly don't start a variable with a capital letter or all caps. That means something very specific in Java. All caps would be a constant and not a variable. And I'm going to go ahead and play around with a couple of formats and try and choose one that kind of makes sense. Anyway, I'm not going to use this right now because I want to see the raw data, and then I'll apply it and then maybe change it around. Okay. All right, so now what I want to do is the only two things left is I want to build my string and then show my string. So basically, I like to get ahead of myself sometimes. I'll just say string. I'm just going to do part of this and then run it, and then I'll fill in the blanks as I go along. Now I could call this response, you know, if I wanted to. Certainly not X, Y, or Z. I can go ahead, an appropriate also word here would be output, since I'm building output. And I'm going to go ahead and build my string. I'm going to go ahead and put an escape code for a new line. And I'm just going to go ahead and say ounces, colon, space, and then I'm going to concatenate that with OZ. Okay, so for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and create that one little line. I'm going to come, because I got to build more, I've got to expand that. And then I come over here to the part that's, that says show it, and then I'll do an S out and pass the variable called output. Okay. Now, what a lot of people like to do is that instead of creating the variable and then passing the variable, they like to just go ahead and build the output right in here. That's fine with me too. I just like to go ahead and modularize things so that, you know, to me, it makes things simpler. Let's go ahead and run this right now, even though it's not complete, but it gives you, you know, it gives you the ability to try and debug something. You know, basically what happens to me sometimes, I don't know about you, is that I'll misspell something or I'll forget something. So you probably don't want to wait till the very end of your program anyway. You want to build incrementally. I think that's a really good idea, which is code, run, fix your errors, see what you've missed. Like, you know, a very common thing to forget would be to not apply the formatter. Look over everything, see if anything's underlined. See the little gray thing here? That means it hasn't been used yet. We're going to want to use that. Okay, so for right now, let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens. So it shows up down over here. I have to actually click down here to get started. So how many ounces do you want to convert? Yeah, I don't know. You're probably going to want to, oh, look at this. It's coming down below the line, and the requirement and the way I want this to run is I want to be able to type in the data to the left of the prompt, not down below it. I mean, if you want to do it that way, fine. No, not really fine. The specifications say that are very clear that it should appear, the ability to input should appear to the right of the question mark. So let me just go ahead and complete this and now I'll fix it. Like this is a good example of you know, you find things that need to get fine-tuned as you go along. So now, you know, it says ounces 100 because it just did the first line of text. Great. Okay, so now I have to go back to to go and fix this prompt. So I see the prompt line on line 18. Does anybody have an idea how would I fix this line so that when I run it, the blinking cursor is to the right of the question mark? Well, my friends, that is done with the print method and not the print line method. Okay? Yeah. You know, so the print method will give us that. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to go ahead and continue to build my string here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and, you know, I could go just left to right on this, but I'm going to go ahead and compulsively just go down one line, add another plus sign, and then the string. In this case, we got to go down one line, so it's another escape code, cups, colon space, and then I'm going to concatenate that with the variable called cup, right? Then I'm going to press enter again, concatenate, put in the string. I know I got to go down one line. How do I know how to go down one line? You go to your specs. You'll notice that the specs call for the output to be 1 per line, so that we're going to use the \n, not /n. A lot of people want to put /n. It's \n for a new line. After cups, we've got pints, colon, and I'm going to go ahead and concatenate pints, or pint, excuse me. You got to put in the right variable name. Look at the way I misspelled that. Oh, that's, look, I put in pint correctly on line 33, but it's coming out in red, and it's coming out in red because the editor is saying, hey, you don't have a variable declared PINT. Now I could go ahead and put it in misspelled. I mean, I wouldn't want to. What you really should do is come over here to line 23 and spell it right. It's pint. Okay, I'm going to come back down over here. So there you go. You see how a lot of times you find things as you go along. It's very rare that a human being can write code from finish to end without any kind of errors at all. Okay, so after pints, what do I have? I have quarts. Same old madness here. Concatenate that with QT, whatever however you called it. If you spelled it out, that's all right with me. You know? But the only thing I wouldn't want would be C, P, Q, O. That would be, I think, totally unacceptable for the variable names. Another new line, we'll have gallons. A lot of times also you may find sometimes, you know, you don't get an error message if you misspell something like that. You may not visually see it, so you have to go and you're not gonna, the editor's not gonna help you on that. Or maybe you put it in as singular instead of plural. So you know, so let's go ahead and put it in correctly, gallons, and concatenate that with the variable would be just GAL. Notice how I've got a squiggly on here. I haven't used the formatter yet. I want to play around with this for right now. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this again. Notice how I click to the right of the question mark, and I'm able to do that because I use the print method instead of the print line method. Okay, so if you have some test data that you confirm to be correct with a calculator, that would be good to do, because a lot of times you can fool yourself to think that you have typed in your equations correct and you have not. Okay, so I always promote the idea of testing things with a calculator. Okay, so here we go. Let's see what the output says. Let me give myself a little bit more viewing area on here. So how many ounces do you wish to convert? Checking for English, 100. Notice how it skips a line and it comes to ounces and it repeats this. And notice how the output has many decimal places on here. Now, how in the world, let's say that the requirements say that we need to have output set to 2 decimal places. Let's say we want 2 decimal places, but we only want to show them if necessary. In other words, if there is, floating point. So let me go ahead and let's use this formatting string on here. Let's use another one here. Let's use 0, 0. Okay. So that pound signs means optional, but the 0, 0 means you're going to get .00, even though, like that 100, it's going to say 100.00. Well, whether it's, and if I put the pound sign in there, it's just going to say 100. So I kind of like gave it away, as to, what you're going to end up seeing. But let me, let me go ahead and, I remember I just told you don't use a lot of abbreviations and stuff like that. But pattern formatter certainly is really long. What if I double click on this and just put in DF or decimal formatter? Do you think you could remember that? And yeah, I think that would help out. So see this ounce thing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just double click on that, and I'm going to do a Control X, and then I'm going to say DF dot. And what I'm going to do now is I'm using the name of the object, and I'm going to go ahead and use the format method, and I'm going to pass it. Well, I already put it in there, but I could do a Control V to put it in there. It's ounce. And I'm going to do that for each one of these little guys. So I'm going to do a Control X and then DF dot format. So we're using the format method, and Control V to put in cup. And let's do that for pint. If you want to edit the line with using the space bar and right and left arrow keys and all that kind of good stuff, I mean, that's up to you. So it's df.format. So the format method allows me to format that variable to look a particular way. So Control X, df, format, Control V puts it in there, and let's just do the last one on here. DF for decimal format, using the format method, Control V. So let's go ahead and see what we end up with now. How many ounces do you wish to convert? I'll say 100 again. And let's see what the output looks like. And it says, it shows the output, but it shows the .00 on there. How would this, at least, I don't have like, what did we have? We had like 5 decimal places coming out here. I think it would look nicer if we used optional. Okay, so let's go back over here to the decimal formatter and put in pound sign, and let's go ahead and run this one more time. How many ounces do you wish to convert? And let's see what we get. Now it says ounces 100, and in this case, since it's optional, you get 12.5. So it all depends on what the specs are, how you want to go ahead and receive output. I would pay very, very close attention to to the actual requirement of whatever it is that you're constructing. Ultimately, what things will look like depend on what the client wants. So the client pretty much determines what the output of the program should consist of. So the systems analyst typically meets with the client and determines what the output is going to look like, so that you want to go ahead and deliver exactly what the client wants. If they want it to show up with just optional and so that if there's a 0, it doesn't need to show up, then you would use it the way I specify. Okay, so let's just go ahead and leave it the way it is here, and let's look at it again one more time from top to bottom. What do I have? I've got my general comments at the top. I've got my class definition, and notice I'll show you this. Inside of main, I can collapse main. See that plus sign and minus sign, and then I can also expand it. Okay, you can do that also with the import statements. And I show you that because sometimes maybe somebody else may have collapsed something. You need to be, just like I showed you how you can do that over here in your folder window over here, so that you need to be able to navigate to your .java file. Remember, the .java file is just a text file. We're using NetBeans because it can help us write our code better. It provides us with a lot of important visual feedbacks, like the one I'm seeing right now. Look at this. I've clicked on the opening curly bracket for main, and if you scroll down, you'll notice that the closing curly bracket is also highlighted in yellow. So a lot of times when you're getting errors and you don't know what's going on, a really good thing to start off with is to make sure you haven't deleted any curly brackets, because when people are first starting off, they're kind of like their worst enemy, and they end up deleting a curly bracket. That's why it's important to align your curly brackets if you're a beginner. Then later on, you can just leave them the way they are and just get right to your code. If you're a beginner, again, you're going to want to go ahead and put in general comments, specific comments, and the specific comments are a good way of pathing out where you're going to go. It's the way I use these comments is kind of like an outline in English, where it's so that you know where you're going. It's kind of like using these comments as pseudocode or as a flow chart that pretty much delineate your algorithm. Remember, in computer science, we have an algorithm, which is the steps that we go through to solve our problem. And sometimes these steps are a little bit different depending upon who is building the solution. And of course, the solution depends upon the problem definition. And the input and output is pretty much determined by the client. In this case, my friends, when you're first starting off, you want to think of your client as, your professor and the problem that you're confronting. And you want to go ahead and write your code specifically to solve that particular problem. So, in summary, this is my little demo of a Java application that utilizes the scanner class to acquire input from a console window and to then use that data to show a specific kind of output. Now remember that when the data that comes in through the console or through any prompt is a string, and we're not going to be able to do math on it unless we convert it to the proper data type. All right, well, that's my rendition of it. Hopefully you learned something and enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Professor Benavides, out.